Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here with a brand new Vampire Necro build for the Greymoor chapter in ESO. I've taken what I think are the best of the new Vampire skills and put them into what I think is basically an unkillable Necromancer build. We have insane damage reduction, healing, AoE damage over time, and this is just a lot of fun to play, you guys. So as usual, we'll go over the stats, we'll go over gear set options, what skills I'm using, champion points, I'll talk about the outfit style, and then I'll show you a quick rotation and some gameplay at the end, so make sure you stick around for the entire video. It's a brand new Vampire Necro build for the Greymoor chapter. Let's get started. Alright everybody, here we are back on the Magicka Necromancer, this time around another solo PvE build. This is updated for the Greymoor chapter. I'm on the Greymoor PTS right now. So we'll be checking out the new and updated version of those vampire skills and how they can synergize really well with the Necromancer class to make a very strong and basically unkillable build. So we'll look at how we put that all together. As usual, keep in mind this is a solo build, so this is not a pure DPS build. Instead, we're kind of focusing on survivability, especially our defenses are self-healing, as well as damage. So we'll go over all that. But let's go ahead and check out the buff stats first. Sitting at about 39k max Magicka, 21k max health, 10k max stamina. Magicka recovery with our potion active. And of course our pet buddy active. It's going to be about 1100 Magicka recovery, but this is going to be a mist form build, you guys, which means the Magicka recovery needs to come from elsewhere. So we'll talk about that in our stats and our gear set choices. 2300 spell damage, 66% spell critical. Spell damage actually does get a nice buff from this vampire skill, which we'll talk about in a minute. So 3k buffed spell damage. And we also get even more from our back bar enchant. Go ahead and heal up there. And then in terms of our resistances, this is a light armor build, but we're still pretty solid at about 16k spell and physical resistance, even though using Mist form we have 75% damage reduction. So don't worry about the resistances. Your damage reduction is insanely high using the new Vampire Mist form. 64 points into max Magicka. I'm using the blue stat food here. You don't see the bonuses on the PTS currently. I believe that is a bug, but you are getting max health and max Magicka from that. I'm using the Shadow Mundus for the extra critical damage bonus here. That's because you saw my critical was pretty high, about 70% unbuffed. And then as a Necromancer, we do get passives which increase our crit chance by 20 to 30%. So we can have almost 100% crit chance on this build, which is actually really nice. It's going to synergize with the Necromancer skills and the Vampire skills pretty well. Currently sitting at stage 1, and I am playing around with the different stages. Right now, the regular ability costs do increase the higher Vampire stage you are. So at Vampire stage 4, you actually get a 20% cost increase on your Necromancer abilities, which is a little bit hard, especially when you're soloing. So I am experimenting with stage 1. At stage 1, you can use all the Vampire skills. You just don't have some of the passives like the invisibility when running and undeath. So you can play around with the levels here depending on what you're comfortable with. And then our buffs here, passive buffs, we'll talk about how we get those in a minute. In terms of the potions, you do want the spell power potion as a Magicka Necromancer because we don't have easy access to that spell power buff. And then in terms of the race, currently I'm a high elf. I think high elf goes with some of the ways that we're playing this build pretty well since we are channeling. We do get reduced damage while channeling. We also get some Magicka and stamina sustain based on whichever is lower. We get the 2000 max Magicka. We get the extra spell damage. Really, though, any race is fine, but high elf is probably preferable for this build specifically. So let's talk about the gear sets next. Starting with our first 5-piece set. Probably guessed this with how high my crit chance was. I am running Mother Sorrow on the weapons and jewelry. So we get a good max Magicka and spell crit bonus here. Very nice for soloing. Great for group DPS too. It's a great all-around set. Comes from the Dishan zone. So you can get this pretty easily. You can pick it up on guild traders. You can farm it yourself if you want. But I'm just running the lightning staff on the front bar. I did change this over to sharpened You can also run Nirnhoned if you want. You can run Infused, but Sharpen just for the extra damage. By the way this works, you guys, the more damage we do, the more healing we get back as a vampire. So penetration is going to be important. We also have some good penetration from our Necromancer class passives. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I do like Sharpen trait just for the extra damage and healing that you'll get on that. Then I'm also running the Lightning Staff on the back bar. So if you can pick up 2 of these, that would be ideal. Though you don't necessarily need a Lightning Staff of Mother Sorrow. It could be a Lightning Staff of anything, willpower, whatever. A crafted Lightning Staff on the back bar is fine. As long as it's infused trait with a weapon and spell damage enchant. So your spell damage gets increased by about 600 fully buffed for 5 seconds. And that refreshes itself every 5 seconds. So that's what we want on our front and back bar, Lightning Staff on both. And then just for the jewelry here, necklace and 2 rings of a Mother Sorrow. I'm using 2 spell damage enchants and 1 reduced cost enchant. This is going to help a lot as a vampire because we do get that increased cost of abilities. And we do want to reduce our cost as much as possible, especially on Mist Form, which already has a pretty low cost, like 1,000, maybe 1,100 Magicka per second. But this is going to reduce it by quite a bit. For our next 5-piece set, we're going with something a little bit interesting, something to actually go along with the vampire theme. And no, it's not the Vampire Lord set. This set is really cool for vampires. It's called Hollowfang Thirst. This is actually way back from the Scalebreaker DLC from the Moongrave Fane dungeon. And what it basically does is it's going to help our sustain. So we have Spell Critical, we have Max Magicka, we have Spell Critical again. So it goes great with Mother Sorrow. And then for the 5-piece, whenever you critically heal or critically damage a target, spawn a ball of hemoglobin at their location. After 2 seconds, the ball explodes, restoring 3,000 Magicka and applying minor vitality for 9 seconds. This effect can occur every 9 seconds. So basically 3,000 Magicka comes in every 9 seconds. Now, why is that important for this build? Well, this build is focused mainly around staying in Mist Form as long as possible. And we'll talk about this more in the skills, but the way Mist Form works is you stop recovering Magicka. Your Magicka recovery is basically put at 0 while you're in Mist Form. So there's no other way to gain your Magicka back other than a few kind of interesting ways. One of them being sets like this. So the set is very easy to proc, especially running Mother Sorrow as our other 5-piece. Our crit values are already very high, so this is going to be proccing every 9 seconds, and it does provide a good bit of Magicka back. Now, there are other sets in the game that will do this for you, though maybe not as effectively. If you don't have this DLC, you can actually get another similar set from the base game, which does a similar thing called Magicka Furnace. Magicka Furnace gives you 8,000 Magicka back, but that's only every 30 seconds. So that is similar, but you get slightly more from the Hollowfang Thirst set. So if you only have access to the base game, you can pick up this set. It's not quite as good, but similar. So that would be another option there. So we are running that 5 pieces on the body. This is a light armor set, as I mentioned, from the Scalebreaker DLC. So running light feet, legs, hands, waist, and chest of the Hollowfang set. All divines, that's going to be your best in slot trait. All max Magicka enchants. Now, last but not least, for the monster set, I decided to use Ice Heart here just for the extra spell critical, which again, we want to focus on spell critical, and then the extra damage shield. So you can see almost a 6k damage shield. And we also do some bonus frost damage. And this again procs on crit damage, which we already have very high crit damage, so it all works out well. This is just that extra bit of protection that's going to help you solo things like world bosses that can hit you pretty hard. So if you have this, I recommend a heavy helmet and a medium shoulders. That's just going to let you maximize your Undaunted passives. Max health enchant on the helmet, and then stamina enchant on the shoulders. Again, divines. It's going to be your best in slot trait for those. So that is the setup. We got Hollowfang on the body. We've got the Ice Heart monster set, and then Mother Sorrow on our weapons and jewelry. Let's jump into the skills next on our Magicka Necro Vampire. Starting off with a good one, Mystic Siphon. This deals an amazing amount of damage over time, AoE damage over time, in fact. Shock damage for 12 seconds. It also restores Magicka, though this does not work. The Magicka Restore at least does not work while you're in Mist Form. but you do get the extra damage. You get the 3% damage done in this case. And what we like about this, especially on the vampire, is it's free to cast, you guys. One of the issues vampires are going to have if it remains the way it is right now on PTS is, like I mentioned, that cost increase. So whatever skills you can run that are either low cost or free, that's the way you want to go, in my opinion, on a vampire build. So Necromancer actually synergizes really well with this because we have a lot of low-cost abilities and even some, like we see here, that are free. Now, the only thing that you need to know here is you do need a corpse on the ground, but we do get at least 2 of those with the way I have the build set up currently. Next up, Blood Mist, and this is the main skill of the build that makes it work. Dissolve into a bloody mist, reducing your damage taken by 75% as long as you maintain the channel. While in this form, you deal about 1,300 Magicka damage every 1 second, and you heal for the damage caused. So, I mean, just look at this, you guys. 75% damage reduction. There's very few skills that offer that amount of protection. And not only that, we're doing Magicka damage, AoE around us, and we're getting healed at the same time. So if you haven't seen the new vampire skills, this is what it looks like. And then you still can move around in this form, obviously, but then you have that red AoE around you. This is doing damage and healing you at the same time. So it's extremely, extremely strong. Now, the more enemies you hit, the more healing that you do, because each enemy hit gives you that same 1,300 health back every 1 second. So that health back does stack. So that healing does stack. And then it can crit as well. So we already have extremely high crit chance, which means that this can hit, 3-4K per second. And so that's damage done and healing, and then potentially multiply the healing per target. So like I said in the intro, this build is essentially unkillable. And the more enemies that you have trying to hit you, the more healing that you get back. And it is a toggle now as well, so that is the difference. So basically the way this works is you're going to want to apply, some of your other abilities, ground-based AoEs, and then just jump right into Mist form for that extra protection, that extra healing, while all your dots are damaging everything around you. That's the basic idea. So that does come from the Vampire skill line, the new reworked skill line. That's going to be the last ability that you get there, and Blood Mist is the morph that heals you back and does damage. So that's what we want for this build. Next up, Unnerving Boneyard. This is a Necromancer ability. It's AoE damage over time, and this is from the Gravelord skill line. Third ability that you get, Unnerving Boneyard, is the preferred morph, in my opinion, for soloing because you get the Major Breach debuff. So that's 50 to 80 spell resistance debuff on all your targets around you. So that's really good for increasing your damage. That makes your Blood Mist hit for even more damage. Now, this is a flex spot. If you're only fighting like a single target boss, then the AoE is not as useful, and it is expensive. You guys can see over 3K cost there on this ability. If you're in a higher level vampire form, it's going to cost over 4K. So what you can do on like a single target boss fight where you don't need the AoE necessarily is just swap in Elemental Drain. Again, we want to make use of as many free abilities as possible on a vampire setup, and this is another free ability. Gives you the same Major Breach debuff, and it gives you Minor Magicka Steal, which gives you a bit of Magicka back every 1 second. So that's what I would recommend for a single target boss or something like that. For AoE, let's say you're grinding experience or just going through a dungeon, then I'm going to pick Unnerving Boneyard in that case. Next up, we got Inner Light. This is from the Mages Guild. And this is just basically a passive magic buff. So it's the first ability you get from the Mages Guild. 5% max Magicka while slotted. You gain Major Prophecy, so that's 10% extra spell critical. And it's just a nice way to increase our stats. Again, we're not going to cast this. We don't need to cast it for anything. It's just a passive buff. Last regular ability here is going to be Sated Fury. This is again from the new Vampire skills. That's the second ability that you get. So this actually increases your weapon and spell damage by a massive 660 while you have this toggled. It is a toggled skill, and it costs health. It doesn't cost Magicka at all. It costs health to cast every 1 second. You can see about 1,700 health. And when you toggle this ability off, you heal for 35% of the health cost you spent while it was toggled on. So it does act as a burst heal as well. So how this works, cast this. You can see my health is draining, but my spell damage went up, significantly, 660 spell damage. And when this runs out, either you can turn the toggle off or it will actually turn itself off when your health gets too low. I'll just let it run out. You can see you get a big chunk of healing back. We'll show that one more time. The extra AoE that you saw there, that's the Hollow Fang Thirst, the hemoglobin proc there. So let's do the Sated Fury one more time. This time I'll just end the toggle myself, and I get the heal. There you go. That's how that works. So very strong, and you can potentially have this up 100% of the time. You might be worried about that, your health dropping. But remember, while you have Mistform on, you're going to be healed every 1 second as well. So basically, those two effects will cancel each other out. That's the way it's going to work. You're losing the health from Fury while you're gaining the health from Mistform. Lastly, for our front bar ultimate, I'm using Temporal Guard right now from the Psijic Order skill line. This is really great for soloing, you guys, because it offers us passive minor protection on our front bar. It also gives us a passive damage shield when you hold block. That's from the Psijic Order passives. Now, that is from the Somerset chapter, so you will need that DLC in order to access this. We're not going to use it. It's really just there for the passives. And if you don't have that, another really nice option is going to be Glacial Colossus from the Necromancer skill line. That's from Gravelord skills. Now, I'm not going to be using this either, but this does give some nice passives, especially when we look at increasing our crit hit chance. But our main ultimate that we're going to be using is going to be the Vampire form on the back bar. Speaking of that back bar, first ability on our back bar is going to be Blockade of Storms. That, of course, is from the Destruction Staff skill line, the second ability that you get there. Elemental Blockade just has the longer duration, so that's what I recommend. Longer duration just because this keeps our spell damage enchant up as long as possible. Next up, we've got Necrotic Potency. This is an amazing Necromancer ability. Comes from the Bone Tyrant skill line. That's the third ability that you get. And Necrotic Potency is the morph that I like for soloing because this gives you more ultimate back. You can see 6 ultimate for every corpse that's on the ground, plus you get a little bit of healing, and your damage taken is reduced by 3%. So this is amazing, you guys, if you want to use this build for like grinding gold or grinding champion points or something like that, because you get ultimate back for every kill that you get. So it's very, very strong. Helps you get up that ultimate as quickly as possible. And next up, I'm running Channeled Acceleration. This is just another Psijic Order buff. So that is the third ability that you get from the Psijic Order skill line. This gives us Minor Force for 36 seconds, plus some extra movement speed, which is nice, the Major Expedition. But our crit chance, you guys, is so high on this build that increasing our crit hit damage by another 10%. We already have the Shadow Mundus, right? That's going to make our abilities do even more damage. So I recommend that if you have the skill line. And then last here, just our 2 buffs. Skeletal Arcanist. This actually does damage as well. So this is from Gravelord. That's the second to last ability. So this does damage for 16 seconds. The cost is pretty low. And it does AoE damage as well. It also creates a corpse, which we're going to need for our siphoning, our shock siphon on the front bar, right? Mystic Siphon. You can cast Mystic Siphon based on the corpse that you get from your skeletal mage here on the back bar. So it's a really good ability. Definitely recommend that. And then Beckoning Armor. This is awesome. From the Bone Tyrant skill line again. Second ability that you get. Beckoning Armor is the morph that you want for soloing because this brings in ranged enemies. Enemies that strike you will be pulled towards you once every 3 seconds. So this is really fun because you have the armor that pulls enemies in, and then you just suck them into your Mistform, basically add them to your pile of bodies, do all that damage, get all that healing back. So that's really, really nice. You don't have to, move around too much. You just basically stay in one central location, have all your dots, and pull in enemies automatically. You don't even have to think about it. So it's a really great skill. Now, lastly, of course, we got to run the Vampire Ultimate. So I've put this on the back bar, and I'm using the Bat Swarm version. So Swarming Scion. When you transform, your max health, max magicka, and stamina is increased by 10,000. You also get a instant heal to full, and any damage that you do also heals you back. So this is a nice heal over time in addition to the Blood Mist, and it lasts a good 20 seconds, so this stays up pretty long. It makes the build even more effective. See, I have enough ultimate right now, so let's just show it off. Why don't we? So there's the transformation. Here you can see the swarming bats, And those will be doing damage every second and healing me as well. And then you can just cast all your regular abilities while you're doing this. You can even go into the Blood Mist form while you're in Bat Swarm. So that's really nice for this build. Now, in terms of passives, let's talk about the vampire passives first, since that's the focus of this build. So the new passives, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not all the way at stage 4. I don't think you need to be at stage 4 for this to work, because there are some downsides, and that's listed here under feed. You can see stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. If we were at stage 4, our regular abilities would cost 20% more, though our vampire abilities would cost less. So it would actually make it easier to be in mist form for longer. But your other skills, like your Boneyard, your Wall of Elements, all of those would cost a lot more. So I don't know if it's worth it. You also lose all your health recovery. That basically goes to 0. You take more flame damage. So I'm liking it right now at stage 1. But like I said before, just experiment and see where you like it on your build. Darkstalker, this will be good to reduce the time to enter sneak. Strike from the Shadows, this does increase our spell damage actually a little bit coming out of mist form. I forgot to mention that. So when I enter mist form and when I leave it, you will get that little extra spell damage, which is nice. Blood Ritual, this is just the same passive as before. That's how you give your vampire bite essentially to somebody else. And then Undeath, you'll only get this at stage 3 or higher. I don't know that you need this necessarily, but you can play around with it. So that's 30% damage reduction based on your missing health. So the less health you have, the tankier you are. And then Unnatural Movement, that turns you invisible while sprinting after 3 seconds. That's only at stage 4 though. This would be fun to play around in PvE. If you're solo, you can kind of go places where you wouldn't be able to go normally due to the invisibility. So definitely check it out. It's pretty fun to play around with. Now, what other passives do you need on this build? Obviously, all your class passives. Necromancers have some of the best class passives in the game. We've got that reduced cost on our Arcanist. Death Knell, this is the crit strike chance that I was talking about. When an enemy is under 25% health, we have 30%, 20 to 30, depends on your ultimate, bonus crit chance. So you can basically get up to 100% crit chance those last 25%, which is huge. Again, we're running the Shadow Mundus. So that Blood Mist is going to hit super hard with that passive. Dismember, we get extra physical penetration while a Gravelord ability is active. So that's why you want to keep your Mage up 100% of the time, or at least your Boneyard. Either one of those will proc that extra penetration. And then Rapid Rot increases your damage done with damage over time effects. So Blood Mist and some of our other abilities are damage over time effects, so that's really good. Bone Tyrant, we get some sustain back, disdain harm. This reduces our damage taken from dot effects. Health Avarice, we're not really going to use very much, but this Last Gasp passive is awesome. You guys, make sure you pick this up. An extra 1250 health. You want as much health as possible on your vampire build for sure. And then Living Death, most of these have to do with healing. But you can pick these up as well. You get ultimate back when you use a corpse. And then Undead Confederate, when you have that Mage active, you also get 200 Magicka and Stamina Recovery. Definitely pick up all your Destruction Staff passives since we're doing double Destro Staff. All of your Light Armor passives, you want these. Vampire passive, we already talked about that. Mage's Guild, you want all of these. Psijic Order, if you do happen to have this, especially the ultimate on the front bar, then pick up Concentrated Barrier for that extra bonus damage shield when you're blocking. Undaunted Metal, this is really good for the bonus 6% stats if you happen to have that. Salt and Support, not needed for this build. Do pick up your racial passives though. Do pick up Alchemy Medicinal Use. And let's talk about champion points. So again, these are mostly for soloing. That's the whole point of this build. 31 into Warlord. 75 Tenacity. The idea being if you need to sustain, like if your misform is just dropping you too low, and your sets can't help you keep your Magicka recovery up, you can drop Mistform for a second or two to just throw in a heavy attack, and you'll get as much Magicka as possible there with Tenacity. 56 into Arcanist, 15 into Mooncalf, 48 Shadow Ward, 44 Tumbling. In the blue tree, 37 into Bless. This does increase the healing back from Blood Mist. 51 into Elfborn, 64 Elemental Expert, 46 Spell Erosion, then 72 into Thaumaturge for the extra dot damage. In the red tree, 72 Ironclad, 49 Hardy and Elemental Defender, 34 Thick-Skinned 18 light armor focused, 48 into Bastion. This does increase things like our Ice Heart damage shield, even the Sigic Order damage shield when blocking, so it's good to put a few points here. Now in terms of the outfit style, this is basically Dark Brotherhood. It's Dark Brotherhood robe and gloves. The shoulder pieces, that's the Prophet's Shawl, and then I have the Daedric hood there, which is light armor, and then the Fanglair belt. So let's just quickly go over the rotation. Now on your back bar, you have your 2 buffs here, the Skeletal Mage and your Bone Armor. Make sure you have those active, and then go right into a Wall of Elements and bar swap. Over here, you'll want to drop your Graveyard. Make sure Fury is up, and then go into Mist form. So here we can check out the healing and damage reduction. You can see I'm basically taking 0 damage, even though I'm losing a bunch of health from having Sated Fury active. My health is basically not moving. Now, if you do need a quick burst heal, like right here, you can actually recast Fury and get all that health back, and then just bar swap. Go back into all your buffs again. Make sure you've got Graveyard on the ground. Make sure your potion stays active. Make sure Fury is up. As you have a corpse on the ground, you want to make sure to cast your Siphon, and that's how it works. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this Vampire Necro build for the Greymoor chapter. I hope you guys like this one. This is a lot of fun to put together. If you enjoyed the video, of course, don't forget to crush that like button. It really does help out the channel. And make sure you subscribe to the channel for lots more videos just like this. I do put out regular build videos, guides, and discussions here on the Elder Scrolls Online every week. So make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss anything. If you'd like to support the channel further, there's links below to my social media. There's that join button. You can click on that for more information. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe. I will see you around in the next video.